If you want to establish credibility, it's useful to know that it depends on two things: showcasing your expertise and establishing connections with others. The second component, creating a connection with others, can be challenging when you're presenting to a client team remotely and people don't know each other. To overcome this challenge, business professionals rely on introductions. And this makes sense. In fact, existing scientific literature related to building connections in virtual meetings suggests that when you talk to people you haven't met, you can connect with them through self-disclosure. But what kind of self-disclosure or introduction is best during a virtual sales meeting? In this neuroscience study, I analyzed the impact of the style and length of introductions that were carried through before a sales presentation on the topic of customer success. The experiment went like this. I assigned the B2B buyers randomly to one of 4 groups and asked them to watch the same presentation, with the only difference being how members from the vendor and the client team introduced themselves. A sales rep from the vendor side managed the virtual call, and the introductions of participants from the vendor and client side were carried out like this. For Group 1, the main presenter, the sales rep, displayed a slide that introduced all participants, 3 participants from the vendor side and 3 from the client side. Group 2 heard one person from the vendor side introduce himself and also introduce the other 2 people from his team. Then one person from the client side introduced himself and the other people from the client team. Group 3 heard all participants introduce themselves one by one, mentioning only their name and job title. And Group 4 heard all people introduce themselves, but each person added extra details to their name and job title, such as additional responsibilities and goals for the call. It's also useful to know that in our study we used job titles that felt familiar to participants, such as IT executive, customer success manager, director of finance. We did not include whimsical titles like marketing rock star or conversation architect or dream alchemist. Analyzing the affective variables for the entire presentation, we found that participants in Group 3 attended the sales presentation in a happy state of mind. This is the group who heard all attendees introduce themselves briefly. Participants in Group 4, who listened to the extra details during the introduction, were close to a neutral state, but cognitively, they experienced a reduction in motivation after those longer introductions. The opposite occurred for Group 3, where the attendees kept the introductions short. We found increased motivation during the presentation that followed, and Group 3 was the only group that showed an approach behavior toward the content. All participants completed a memory test after 48 hours, and memory for the main message of the presentation was the lowest for Group 2, the group where one person from each team introduced everyone else. So, here are some do's and don'ts for introductions on virtual sales calls. Do invite participants to introduce themselves, as this will have a positive impact later in the presentation and will put buyers in a relaxed state and convince them to approach the content. Do keep the introductions short, as buyers will find the presentation pleasant and effortless. Don't ask people to share extra details about their roles. The details may feel good in the moment, but reduce engagement for the rest of the presentation and increase fatigue. Don't introduce people by using a slide. Although it may feel good at the beginning, people get more tired during the rest of the presentation. And above all, don't ask people from a team to introduce everyone else. Buyers don't like it when it happens. It also increases boredom, fatigue, and cognitive workload, and decreases motivation for the rest of the presentation.